So welcome back. This time we will add a new page. It's going to be called Wireframe, and we are going to create our few first screens with a low fidelity design, or better said, wireframe. So let's create a new page and call it Wireframes. Okay. And now what we need are our screens. So how we are going to add our screen? We are going to go to the frame, go to the phone, and let's choose iPhone 14 and 15 Pro, okay? Basically, width of 393 pixels is totally fine for us, and it's going to cover most of the devices, so let's just stick with that. Also, during the wireframing phase, you don't need to focus on too much of a details or usage of any colors. Mostly we are just going to place the rectangles and maybe the text around, and maybe place some icons as well. I'm going to show you the plugin for that. It's really amazing. So basically we are going to kind of structure it in the way to present it, just to understand the concept of the work. And for example, when you're presenting it to the client, he's going to understand, okay, this is how application works. If he's approving that work, let's continue with the final design, and we will cover that later in our course. So let's start with Apple Design Recesses. Let's go back to that file, and what we need are this clock status bar with those icons, and we need this home indicator button, okay? And on the right side we can see the properties of that component, so we can see it for the device, orientation and mode. So we are probably going to switch between light and dark most of the time. We are not going to play around with device settings or orientation for that. So what we can do is copy those elements into our pages. So let's do that with just selecting it. You can see the home indicator on the left is selected. Control C or Command C, and we are going to place it into our screen with Command V or Control V. And now as it's placed, let's move it on the bottom, or we can choose this alignment to align the bottom and align to the center. Okay, and after we copied that home indicator, what we need is a status bar up top. The best one that we can choose from is going to example components, for example, and choosing this one on the top. So selecting as a status bar with this kind of rectangle shape, and let's copy it. So as we can see on the right side, we are having the mode and the background. That's really important to have. So when we copy it, we can change the background and the way that design is going to work with ours. So let's remove the background, and now we are seeing it's not visible for us, but let's change the mode to the light. So what we can see now is that we have the proper home screen or first screen for our wireframes. Just what we can do is probably do the login page first. So let's just rename it to the login. Okay, enter. And now we change this to the login. Of course, what login pages need is to have maybe the logo type or some logo on the kind of middle or the top section of the screen. And below that, we can choose to have input bars, okay? So how we can do that is just going to the rectangle and maybe creating some rectangles. For example, like this one. Let's say with the width is 356 by height of 60, but maybe we can reduce that to 48, for example. It doesn't really need to be that long or too much with the height. So we are having this rectangle right here. Let's copy it holding the Option or the Alt key on the keyboard, and let's align them properly. Okay, and this could be like login input and register, and down below or username and password, and down below what we can have is login button with register text. Now let's add our text, going to text and adding, for example, username. Okay, let's just change this align to the left, and let's see what we can do. Maybe choosing the body can be good for us. Let's choose the body and duplicate this one on the bottom, and let's change it to the password. Okay, and let's duplicate this one in the middle to have it as a login. Or let's say we are having the register. Okay, now what we can do is probably just align them, but what we really need is just to have some guidance to present to the client, what can work, what shouldn't work. Also, the thing that you're seeing now is that we are kind of guessing on the left and on the right side how to align them. So what we can do is just go to the screen, go to the layout grid, and add our grid. But we are not going to use this grid 10 pixels, we are going to use the columns, and let's add one column on the left and one column to the right. So let's add a one column. Let's say this color can stay, and let's say it's going to be on the left side with a width of, let's say, I don't know, 16 for example, and pressing OK. Now we are seeing that we have some alignment on the left side. And let's add another one, but what we can do is just click on this kind of side, not to this, but a little bit on the left, and hold Command D. It's going to duplicate this one, and let's choose this one to be on the right, basically. So we created two columns, left and the right, and what we can do is just hold these three input sections and move them maybe to those alignments. It doesn't really need to be perfect right now, we just need something to present to the client. And let's not forget our logo. So for example, if we are going to stick with kind of Instagram type application, let's stick with socialgram. I think it's just going to be simple to use, so let's type it. Okay, and let's choose the H1 for this one. Okay, and let's move it into middle. Okay, maybe something like this. Okay, so what we are having on the login screen is that Richard is just typing the username, password, login or register. What we need is also when we click on the register, we also need to register our account. Okay, so let's duplicate this screen, for example, like this, and call it register. And let's change these inputs down below. So for example, what we can do is move this to slightly up, holding the shift button. And let's change this one to the register. What we can do is change the alignment to the center of the text. So when we type, it's going to place it from the middle of the text. So let's stick with that. And let's say what we can do is type here, go back, or maybe back. But let's first align it to the center and type back. But now I changed it previously, so let's align it right now back. Okay, and I don't think this is aligned as well, so okay, now it's aligned. And what we need for registration is to have maybe the username, password, and maybe to have name and surname. So let's move these two down, duplicate those two while holding the shift. Okay, and let's say we need a name, or let's say first name would be more appropriate. First name, and holding the tab button, what you can do is just go from one text to another. So let's change this one to the last name. Okay, so we are having first name, last name, username and password, and register down below. So let's just move them slightly like this. Okay, now I think it's looking good. So basically what we have is now login screen and register screen. Okay. Next thing what we need after we register our account, maybe what we can do is just maybe some pop-up that says welcome to our application or something like that. So let's duplicate this screen and let's call it register to. Okay, now I want to get ideas from teammates. We don't need that right now, so let's cancel that and let's remove all of those stuff. And let's remove this one and let's say continue. And for example, what we can do is add the text box right here that can say thank you. Oops. Thank you for registration. Continue by using our app. Okay, and what we can do is select that text and change it maybe to the H3, for example. And now as you are seeing that those stuff aren't aligned properly, there are a few stuff to maybe change that, or maybe to change this resizing to auto width, and now it's going to stick with our height of the text. Okay, and we can maybe move it slightly down. What we can do is maybe change the opacity for the text, maybe something like this. Okay, and let's move this, continue. What we can do is maybe align it to the center like this one. Okay, and let's stick with that for now. The next thing what we need is the home page. Okay, so when you load up our app, we are probably going to see our logo, chat icon, stories from the users. We are going to see the posts, and we are going to have the navigation bar on the bottom. So let's duplicate this screen right here. And let's call it home. Now let's remove all of our content. And now what we can do is have some stuff going around. Let's start from the top to the bottom. So let's start with our stories. So let's create maybe some rectangle on the top. And now what you're seeing is that this status bar and home indicator is going behind all of our content. So what we can do is just right click on this and send it to the back. Okay, and maybe change the color to something darker, maybe something like that. We are going to change it probably to our fields that we have right here, but we don't need to add colors right now. Let's just play around and see what can work, what doesn't. And now as we are seeing, the contrast of this element isn't right. So let's click on that and change the mode to the dark. Okay, and now we can see it finally properly. And down below we are going to have our navigation, but let's change it a little bit later. Okay, let's, I don't know, prolong it like this. And what we can do is just copy our logo type, change the color to the white, maybe make it slightly smaller. For example, something like this can work. Let's move it maybe to align it to the left, something like that. Let's not, I wouldn't recommend placing the elements near this status bar on the top. What we should do is maybe slightly lower the elements, because we need the space for these elements to work. For example, when you're using the finger, you're maybe sometimes going to misclick this section or miss-swipe this section to pull up the control center on notifications. So what we can do is just stick with moving some elements slightly below that. Okay, and what we need are stories. So let's prolong this one as well and go to our shapes, and let's create our chat heads. For example, something like 60 by 60 can work properly. Okay, and move this circle to the left, and let's add our username tag. So for example, let's just call it username for now, and change this one, for example, to caption, for example. Okay, now as we are seeing that it's not properly aligned with this left section right here, so what we can do is maybe make it slightly, okay, maybe something like this can work, but let's try to align those two like this. Select them and duplicate those stuff around. And now as you are duplicating, don't move anything, just hold the Command D or Control D and paste it as we are seeing like this. Okay, and now we are having our stories. When we move to the final design, then we are probably going to slightly change few stuff, or maybe play around to see what can work, what can doesn't. Maybe make those profile icons slightly bigger. We'll see what will work with the final design. And also what we can do is maybe select all those usernames, or we can just select them in the layer section. So we can just click on this one, holding the shift and selecting all of those elements, and change the fill to maybe something slightly less bright. So now it can look like this. We will see, maybe we are going to add more distance between those elements, but for now let's stick just with representation of our elements. And below that, what we need are posts. Okay, so what we can do is, usually when you see someone posting something on Instagram, you can see the profile icon, username, image that user posted, and maybe a like, share, comment. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create our shape first. Let's say 28 is enough. Let's duplicate this username. Okay, let's make it to the black. Okay, looking solid. And then what we can do is just, while holding the R or pressing R key, we are now with the creation of rectangles. So let's stick with this one and move it slightly below that. Okay. And now what we are missing are few icons. For example, we need the chat icon right here, and we need like, comment, share icon right here, and maybe some 3 dots to maybe report the profile or report the post or hide the post or something like that. So how we are going to do that? Let's go to the plugins. And what you can do is search feather icons. Okay, feather icons is amazing plugin that works with any project, and you can add any icon that you would like. They have around, I think, 287 icons, so that's really nice to see. What we can add is, first let's add the chat icon. So let's see what we can see. Okay, we have the chat icon. Let's add it to our screen. But when you're adding those icons, what you are seeing now is that on the layers as well, you're seeing the name of this frame. It's not inside our frame. So usually what you can do is just move it outside and then move it inside like this. So let's undo this step once again. So when we add our icon, what we can do is move it up, click away, and move it back. So we can see that now this icon is inside our home layer. And let's change the color of that. Don't change the fill, because when we change the fill, it's going to fill out the whole frame. What we need is only the selection colors. Okay, and let's change it to the white. Okay, and what we need down below are comments. So we need this comment right here. We need heart probably, or like. Let's see what's called. Okay, it's a like. Let's move this like this, and let's see send icon. Okay, we got it. So let's move those icons right here and select them all and move them, and move them back into our interface. And let's align them with align vertical center. And what we can do is go to the more option and distribute horizontal spacing to maybe make them spaced out properly. But what we can do is maybe just change them to 16, for example. As you zoom in, when you have proper aligned icons, you're going to see these pink like kind of lines that you can hold on and move them away or together. So let's just stick with 16, for example. I think that's okay. Or maybe let's move it to the 12, I think. Yeah, this can work, and place them under our post like this. Okay, and let's add another button. Maybe it can be those 3 dots that we previously mentioned. Okay, let's find it in our plugin. So what we're seeing is these 3 dots. Let's add it. Okay. And now what we are seeing is that we have our first post on our social gram, but also what we can do is duplicate it below by holding the shift, and let's select the right click, send it to the back. So it's behind those elements. We are also going to duplicate this rectangle right here. Okay. And let's move it slightly to the bottom. And let's change this home indicator to the dark. So now we are seeing it properly as we should. So let's add our icons. It's going to be the home, search, post, notification, and profile. So let's add our icons. It can be the home, it can be the search. Okay, it can be plus icon or to add something. So let's say maybe this one can work. Notifications. And let's say profile. Oops, so it's not profile, probably it's user. Yep. So let's add it right here and change all of those to the white. Okay, and when we select them, what we can see is that we have this icon already to distribute them properly, and let's move them like this. Okay, what also we need is to add the text below them. So let's add our home. It's going to be our smallest text, home, duplicate it, let's call it search, duplicate it as well, let's call it post, duplicate it, let's call it notifications, and let's call this one profile. Okay, and now what we are going to dive deeper is auto layout option. So auto layout option works as a div elements on the web, so it's proper alignment between those elements. It's going to create frames, but within those frames we can align and precisely move our elements and distance them properly. So let's select these 2 elements, and what we can do is go right click and select auto layout or shift A. And basically what we now get is this auto layout option, and we are seeing that we can move these 2 elements within this frame. It's home and home text, so we can move them vertically or horizontally, and we can move the distance between those elements. So let's just say, for example, 4, it can be the distance. Let's stick with this align top center, and we don't need any spacing right now. Let's do that for every single element. Shift A, Shift A, Shift A, and let's move this one away. Let's hold Shift A, okay? And now we can select all of them, place them aligned to the top, and the distance between them 4. You don't need to select all of that and just click Shift A first. It's going to align them not like this. It's going to do kind of different job. So you should just stick by selecting one by one. And now what we can do is select all of them. As we are seeing, all of our frames are selected. Shift A, and now we're seeing that they're properly aligned. So what we can do is maybe create into the center, and let's see what we can do. Let's move it here into our navigation. Let's stretch this one to our left and right alignments. And what we can do is go to this drop down and select auto. So basically what that auto option does, it's going to align these elements away. But the problem that we are getting is that we don't see this post icon aligned with the center of every single thing. So this is not going to work properly. So what we need is something else. So after we ungroup them, what we need to do is select all of those frames and select the width of them to the 60 to make them all same width. And now our software is going to do kind of different job with that, but now we are seeing that these notifications are going over the frame width. So let's maybe make it slightly bigger. Let's say 68 can work. In this case, yeah, it can work properly. So what we can do now is select all of them by holding the Shift. And as we size them now properly, now we are seeing that it's going to be center aligned. So doesn't really matter if you align it as this one. The biggest problem is going to be if you set it to the auto, and now it's going to be fixed. So you have multiple options to just select them hand by hand or change them hand by hand. It doesn't really matter. What's most important is to look proper. So basically what you need is to have every single frame the same width, and now you can stretch it manually to edge of the frames or edge of our alignments and select the width and gap between those elements to do something else. In the next episode, what we are going to continue is with our other screens and probably try to complete our web application. In the next video, we will probably dive into more complex stuff and complete our mobile application.